right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Mallory Smith, Martin Skegg at their home in Portland. It's July 13th, 2020. Thank you both so much for joining us today. First question, and most important question for our purposes today, is why wine?
I don't know why I'm so nervous. I don't know. I have no idea why wine. I'll go.
How did you get into wine?
Oh, okay, let's see. So, I was living in LA, working at Starbucks, and which doesn't really matter, but I started going to meeting a friend. We would meet halfway. He lived like 40 minutes away from me, so we would meet at this bar that was 20 minutes in between each of us. And it just happened that it was a beer and wine only bar. That's the license they had, and I did not like wine. I just didn't care for it, whatever. I was like, oh, I only like whites, if I have to drink it. And the guy who owns the place, and then my friend always wanted to drink red wine. He wanted an Argentinian Malbec. That's like all he wanted to drink. So the guy who owns the bar was like determined to get me to like something. We were there, 4 times a week, and he was like, okay. And he would compare wines to like just to anything. He would be like, okay, do you want something that's more like, I don't know cars, so it didn't really mean anything. But the fact that he was like comparing it to something different, and he was so eager to get me to like something, was really charming and endearing. And so he would like, so one of the days we got a wine, and he was like, okay, I'm going to aerate this for you. And we're both like, oh, don't. We're not fancy. And he was like, no, just trust me. He was like, I'm going to pour it. Wait 10 minutes before you drink it. I promise it's going to be good. Anyway, so just over the course of that summer, I started drinking more red wine, and I was like, okay, I can kind of see. And it was good quality stuff, and so I kind of grew accustomed to that taste. And for some reason, I don't know what the click was. I mean, it just happened because he was just so, he was so passionate about it. And I guess I'm into food and wine I wasn't into wine. I'm into food and beverages and that type of thing anyway. And so I just started growing, I don't know, like an interest in it. And then there was a winery down there that had an ad on Craigslist that was like needed some help over the summer, a tasting room. And I was like, oh, that might be kind of fun. And I just kind of threw my application at it just to see, and I needed a side job, and it was, sounded cute. And I got it, probably just because they were looking for like regular humans. I knew nothing about wine. They didn't ask me any wine questions. And so then I was like thrown into this thing. So I went back to the owner of that bar, and I was like, hey, I got this job now. And so he was so excited. And then he pulled out all these books, and he explained to me all of the language. It was things like, I remember him being like, okay, it's called when you smell it, it's called the nose. It's called the palate. And all of those words that are kind of normal to wine people, he had never even used that language with me before the entire time I was going there, because he was just being normal. And so now he's like introducing me to like the world of wine and the way you speak, which was really, so that's really what got me into it, was his the approachability that he had, and he was not better than me, or like, I don't know if that makes sense.
Then he kind of brought you into the tribe.
Yeah, he brought me into the tribe. Yeah. And I felt like a part of it. I didn't even know that it was hard to, I didn't feel ostracized. There was no part of me that felt ostracized by it until after I got into it. And I was like, oh, how funny. I didn't realize that he was being so, that was like how he introduced it. So it felt so normal at the time. Anyway, he was the best. They've since shut down that wine bar. They just kind of like, it had its day. And so him and his partner have moved on to something different just a couple years ago, and I emailed them, and I was like, it's because of you. But no, it's cute. We have to go visit them. Yeah. Anyway, that's my,
I guess I've always had this kind of weird kind of attraction to wine from like, even as a teenager. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know whether it was just something that seemed, I don't know, kind of mysterious or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I can remember, like, I was probably 17 or 18, and it was a really hot day. This is in England, and we were at this like restaurant bar thing, and I had this white wine that was just, at the time, and it seemed amazing. I just remember it was like bone dry, and it just seemed to go so well with that hot day, and that just kind of, that really clicked. So, and then as I got older, I was just tried to find out more about wine. It was kind of a good time to find out about wine in England. Then there was the supermarkets then just really started getting into stocking wine. So, and they would get things from Eastern Europe. You could get like a Hungarian or Romanian wine that was like pretty cheap in comparison to other things, and pretty good stuff as well, because they were just importing it, and it didn't really have a sort of a brand name, any kind of names like Hungarian wine. People didn't care, but so for people on students and people on budgets, it was great. So I guess I was just kind of into it, and I kind of taught myself some things, and then I was writing restaurant reviews for the Guardian newspaper, and I kind of found that I was choosing dishes to have based upon the wine that I wanted, or something I wanted to try, rather than the other way around. And so when I moved here, I think it was because there's winemakers here, and I could go to wineries. Everything kind of fell into place, and it kind of seemed to kind of click then that this was something that actually, I want to get more into, kind of thing. So I guess it was like a very gradual thing, and then things fell into place for us.
So how did each of you get to Oregon?
You go first.
Well, I had an American wife once, and that's what got me here. And then I was in Portland, and I love it. It's just it's great here, and it's so beautiful around here. And where I come from, we don't have mountains, and it's just you live here.
You is now.
Yeah,
It's just great.
yeah. But that was part of it. Is just the natural beauty of the place, and Portland was a good sized city for me. I lived in London for 20 years, so I was ready to downsize.
Downsize. And I was in LA, and I didn't like LA. I didn't, because it's just hot, and basically I wanted cooler weather. But I still wanted a city, and I still wanted to be on the east, or in the whatever coast this is, the west coast.
Whichever. I
don't know you. So I had dreams of moving to Seattle since I was like a kid, and then, but obviously not obviously, but I did not know much about Portland. And then I had a friend in college who grew up in Corvallis, so we would come up and visit her family pretty often. And so we would come into Portland. So I started to become familiar with it, and I was like, this seems like a good place. It's a city, but small, and I could pursue my writing career. That's what I wanted. They're artsy there.
So tell me about once you're here, and Martin, you especially mentioned like that there are winemakers here. There's an industry here. Tell me about getting to know the Oregon wine industry specifically, and pursuing your interests further.
So I started going to wineries and things. I worked in a tasting room at Domaine Durand just for like a summer. I did a W set here, and I was writing for the Portland Mercury, and then I just started doing a wine column for them, which wasn't just about Oregon wine; it was about wine in general. But that kind of gave me a chance to look into things and find out about things that was going on here. And then just going to all the tastings and industry things, meeting winemakers, interviewing them. I just kind of went from there, really.
What were your first impressions of Oregon's industry?
That's a good question. I guess at the time it felt, so this originally was almost 10 years ago, so different to what it is now. It felt, I liked it because it just felt like it was something that was still creating itself. It was, I lost my train of thought.
It was still creating itself.
Yeah, it's still creating itself, and it just felt almost homemade or something. You know, that was before.
That's cute.
That was before Domaine Serene built a palace on the hill, because there wasn't any of that. There wasn't any of that kind of Napa stuff. It wasn't. It just seemed. It seemed like there was a lot of passion here, and it. When I first started going around it, it was all about Pinot, but then as I got to know the industry better, found out about all the other things that were going on, and there's more of that going on now than there was as well, which was also what I was really interested in.
And Mallory, tell me about your perspectives as you got up here, and what kind of drew you interested in Oregon wine.
Yeah, it's funny, I've never really thought about this until just now, actually. But moving up here, and I wanted to work in wine, but I wanted to work at a wine bar and I didn't even think about like Oregon wine. It wasn't, for some reason, it just didn't. I was like, I love learning about all of the different regions around the world, and so all of those complexities, for some reason, was what drew me in, or what I was the most excited about when it came to wine. And so it wasn't until I started working at a bottle shop. And then, you start getting introduced, people are coming in who are winemakers, and then you start getting introduced to all the Oregon wine, and I was like, oh wow, there's like such a community here, and I don't know why, it's just in my backyard, and I just never even thought about it. Just so weird. But yeah, so and I think it was
which is interesting. Tell me about finding each other and about starting Sunday School Wines, and take us on that path to starting the business you have together.
I mean, we know each other because of the wine bar that Mallory was working at. So that's how we.
Jeez.
Well,
just the noise.
Yeah, I know.
It's a rustic setting. It's okay.
Yeah.
Northeast Portland.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how we got to know each other, and then
he was covering some shifts.
Yeah.
Very romantic. He's not a romantic, so.
I'm sticking to the facts for this.
Yeah. What do you want me? What?
You've got the story about the Sunday school.
Oh, the Sunday school story. Yeah. So we met, and we had been together not that long, about a year and a half or something like that. And what did happen? So I'm working at this bottle shop, which I still work at, and I knew that I wanted wine to be my career forever, my forever thing, whatever, but I knew that I'm not just going to work in the bottle shop for the rest of my life either, so I didn't really know which direction to go in. So I found a few wine mentors and kind of was trying to figure out like what direction I wanted to go in regards to wine. And people, I never really came to any answers other than we just talked about wine and me wanting to be part of tasting groups and learn more. And then someone said, one of my wine mentors was like, you should just teach classes. And I was like, no, I don't know enough to teach classes. That's why I'm like talking to you, because I need to like learn more and figure out which direction to do that in. She's like, no, you know more than like 90% of the people in like someone knows more than you, but you know more than most people. And I was like, no, that's silly. And then a few other people mentioned that to me, friends and stuff in passing would tell me that I should teach wine classes. And at the bottle shop I work at, I mean, one of my favorite things is when people come in and they're like, what does this mean on the wine label? And I can just like totally geek out, and I love explaining like just, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I used to want to be a technical writer, and it's that idea of taking this concept that seems really complex and like dissecting it and making it accessible in human language. I love that. And so that's what I was doing with wine at the bottle shop I work at. And so then there was this other girl who was a customer who one day she said, she was like, if you should teach wine classes, do it and I will bring all my friends. And for some reason that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, okay, fine. If you come and you bring your friends, let's do it. So I was like, well, I'll go home and I'll just mention it to Martin and see, maybe we'll have a conversation about it. So I came home and I was like, hey, what do you think about teaching a wine class? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, okay. I really thought it was going to be a conversation, but it wasn't at all. It's like he had already been thinking about it and never told me. So that's kind of what started it. So we were like, well, let's just do a class on rosé and see how it goes. And side note, funny fact, that girl who said that never came to a wine class until a Zoom class last week. First class in like 3 years.
She didn't bring all her friends.
And she didn't bring all her friends.
Anyway.
But she got it started.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of that.
What did you want to accomplish in that original class? Like, what was your, like, okay, if I do this will be a success?
I don't even know if do you have an answer to that? I feel like I can just
I think
talking.
for the first one, just to get through it without seeming like an idiot.
Yeah.
Or forgetting what I was going to say and just, going to pieces or something. But it went well.
There was no part of me that was like, this is what we're going to do. At all.
Yeah,
we were
it was
just
more
like,
just trying
let's
it.
just do a class and just see what it's like.
Yeah.
And we got all our friends to come because it's like, who else is going to come? And then we did the class and our dynamic together worked so well. It just felt so good and it just felt like it just fit afterwards. And so that's when we were like, oh, this works. And so then we're like, well, let's do another one. And so it was almost kind of Sunday school, like pulled us. Like it wasn't like we set out to create it. It was kind of fun.
What was the best part? What did you enjoy the most about the kind of initial classes as you were kind of being pulled in?
I guess actually one of the things was coming up with the classes themselves, because it's not just like getting the info from the books and putting it down. We have to think about how we're going to translate that into things. So the way we try and do it, kind of in a fun and playful way that people can understand sort of complicated things. So we didn't want to alienate them. So coming up with those ideas, we used to call them Sunday schoolisms. That was kind of fun. That was doing that. Sometimes difficult, but that was good. And then.
Yeah, and the flow, and along with that, like the flow of the classes, and not so it doesn't just feel like a list of facts. It's like, it's almost like when you're writing, like an essay or like your thesis or something, where you're studying this thing and you don't really know, or just writing in general, where you don't really know what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, but as you study that subject tells you how to tell it. If that makes sense. So it's kind of like that, where we would study, this one thing, and then we'd find those stories that we didn't know about, and those stories like showed us how to tell the story of that initial concept. Yeah, so that's actually a lot of work. It's fun, but it's afterwards, but it's a lot.
People are always like, why don't you do a class on this? And we're kind of like, do you know how long it takes us to write a class? We can just knock it out in an afternoon. It might seem like it, but...
That's the sign of a good class, if it looks like it was really easy for you, right?
Yeah.
So take us through that kind of process. Take us through the process from we have this idea for a class, through the creation of it, and then what it's actually like to be in a class. What the actual class session looks like.
So I guess we come up with an idea for a topic, and then we will do a lot of just basic background research. I always do the history things.
Yeah, he's a history professional.
And Mallory doesn't understand dates.
Or just history at all.
Yeah. So,
like, who are those people?
And then Mallory's better at all the stuff to do with anything, like sort of the wines themselves, because she works in the bottle shop. She knows much more about the wines and things like that. So anyway, we kind of got different skill sets that we bring together. So we do all our research, and then we think about what is it we want to get across, what are the things we want to
and what
teach.
are the interesting bits
Yeah.
You know, like for example, the next class we're doing is on southern Italy. So that class, you know, the obvious thing is you have those four main regions in southern Italy, but it's, you know, that's boring to just be like, here are the regions. So in our studying, we'll read, in my brain, I'm like, I'm going to read everything I can find, like all of the books, everything on the internet, literally everything on Basilicata, and then we see like, oh, this is really interesting. Here's the story. This is what almost like personifies that region. And then you use that as kind of like the thing that then grounds those facts about Aglianico, and, you know, so I don't know.
It's kind of like you said earlier, rather than just throwing a bunch of facts at people, we like to have a story. And grounding is what we always try to do. Let's talk about how to
because then wine is so beautiful and interesting, and there's so much culture and like story involved around it, and that's what, if you want to learn about wine, I don't know, it's not only does it make it more interesting and fun, and that's what wine is, but it also like makes you remember those facts, because it gives you context, and it makes it beautiful, it is beautiful, and you're like including that beauty in it, but a story in it. And
we approach wine from we're not like super technical. If you want to, you can go on, there's places you can go and be super technical about wine, and you know, you can get your qualifications and things. We have an aspect of that, but we're also interested in how wine intersects in other ways, to do with, you know, cultures and things, and I don't know, we've done all kinds of things. There's like social history comes into it, women's history at some point. It's like there's all kinds of stuff that can play into
to
it.
everything.
Yeah.
Sun's coming at me.
So I guess once we've done that, we kind of start to put the class together, figure out the flow of it and that kind of thing. And then we would have
what wines best represent like the story that we're taking them through, and then it gets kind of tricky with the order of the wines and the order we want to do the class in, because that's always kind of weird.
Yeah.
We can't do the whites at the end. Sometimes we do. For the story, for the reason of the story.
Yeah, we have to decide whether the story is more important than the wine.
And then, what was the other part?
So take us through an actual class. Give us whether you have an example in mind, like the class that's coming up or a class you just did, and take us through kind of the flow of the class with the history and facts plus the wine itself.
What was the class we just did?
Like yesterday, sparkling wine.
Yeah, should we do that one?
Go for it.
So, I guess we just start with a basic introduction to get people into it. And I can't remember the class, even though it was just yesterday.
It's like, what is a class? Like, we don't do this all the time. What is class like?
Yeah.
So I guess what do? We introduce the class. We try to, I mean, initially we try to bring people in at the very get-go, right? And kind of explain who we are, especially to the people who weren't there, who don't come, who haven't been, whatever. That we want them to be part of this conversation, to ask us questions. We're here for them to learn, and not for like us to just so they kind of are introduced already to the tone of the class, which is approachable and conversational. And then usually we try to ask some questions at the beginning. Like we did on Zoom, you can do polls. So we did a poll yesterday that was, what do you think of when you think of sparkling wine? We had like 12 or 15, from Silly to Napoleon, my grandma, champagne, just to kind of just to set the tone of the class, basically. And
I guess
from here.
I mean, that's one of the important things about what we do is making sure everybody feels included, that there's no stupid questions, and we want people to talk about the wine. Particularly when we do in-person classes, we like it. That's the best, is when people are talking to us about things. So we try to make them feel comfortable about that and say there isn't any right or wrong answers. You don't need to know a language or specific terms to be able to do this. just whatever it tastes like to you, kind of thing. So, yeah, we try to set that at the beginning, and then we will come back to bringing people in and giving them plenty of time for questions to if they didn't understand something,
and then usually there's a structure that the class kind of revolves around that we tell them at the beginning, so they know, like, so they can kind of conceptualize all of the ideas. So for example, for regional classes it's pretty simple because you just go by region, but the sparkling wine class we kind of frame it by method. So you have the 3 primary methods of making sparkling wine, and within one of those is pétillant natural, and then you have the ancestral method, and then you have the traditional method with champagne and cava, and then you have the tank method and prosecco. And so it kind of so they can kind of see what's happening, so it's not just kind of like information thrown. And so
within that we will usually have some history in there, some background on either the method or the region. There's obviously a lot of champagne history, so we would cover some of that.
Nothing.
And people like the history. I thought when we started people wouldn't like the history, and we asked them.
Oh yeah, when we do
things,
in Zoom, when we can do polls, we have sometimes at the beginning we'll say, what are you most excited, or what do you want to learn about the most? History, the regions, how to buy, what to shop for, reading labels. History almost always wins.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
It's incredible. That's why we exist, I guess. That's awesome.
So that's good.
So what are the takeaways? What do you want people to leave a class of yours with? It's not necessarily a point of knowledge that you're looking for. What is it you want them to take away from a class of yours?
I mean, the first thing I thought of was I want them to feel like, I don't even know what the word is. Belonging really is the word I feel like. Like wine can feel so high, like up here. And I want people to learn something, but I want them to feel like they were a part of something and that they can be a part of that thing. I think is for me the biggest thing. And learning something comes along with that, because if you just sat through an hour and a half class and didn't learn anything, you're not going to feel that sense of belonging. So that's part of it. But I think ultimately that's what I hope for.
I was going to say enjoyment, like they had a good time, but within that, presumably that means they did learn something, and the way we were teaching it made them enjoy it as well as learning, and that they enjoyed the wines, even if they didn't like them. There was something, they got something from the wines, and kind of some understanding, and ideally that when they left that class that they would feel comfortable or confident enough to go to a store and choose a wine based around what we have been teaching or something, and so they could ask for that or have an idea of what they wanted or what they liked and didn't like, that kind of thing.
Or at least know what questions to start asking people,
Yeah.
Because wine is so complicated and there's so much information, so you can't, I think our goal is not to teach everyone all of the information about wine. Our goal is to give people foundational knowledge and a foundational understanding so that they know they have the confidence to keep learning and to ask questions. I mean, we don't know we know most things. But yeah, so, and I think that's a misconception, which is interesting that I know you didn't ask about challenges yet, but this is what I think I just came up with this one just now. People want answers, and they want easy answers, and they're like, well, what do I pair with this? Well, how do I buy a wine? How do I read this wine label, or how do I know what to buy from Southern Italy? And I'm like, it's actually so complicated. And so that's a huge challenge, it's frustrating that I can't really answer those questions, because I'm like, well, it's like the English language. Like, there's all these rules, but there is exceptions to every single rule, depending on where you go. And so it's really, really hard to just answer a question straightforwardly. So yeah, that's interesting. I think my goal is to give people the understanding of, here's the rules, but here's like the foundational understanding you need, so that as you continue to learn about wine and shop for wine and drink wine, you kind of know how to continue learning about it, which is a really vague answer to people's questions, and I don't think people are satisfied with that answer, but it's the true answer. So I think that's a huge challenge, is feeling like people don't appreciate that. It's like I want to give people straightforward answers, but then I don't feel like true to myself if I just give them these, like,
Right.
Wikipedia answers. Anyway,
it's not unlike learning how we heard about making wine. You learn how to make wine so you can break all those rules and do, and figure out the exceptions. It sounds kind of familiar in that case. So tell me about as you're getting kind of pulled into this. Tell me about getting the business started and coming up with a client base and a kind of a plan for how it's going to work. And what about the early classes made you think it would work?
I guess that people came to the classes and they came back.
Yeah, people came back. We got lots of positive feedback, people kind of going out of their way, even people that weren't necessarily our friends, to tell us how much they loved it and appreciated it and learned a bunch. And then the fact that people, we had regulars from the get-go who would come to every single class. And I think that was the ultimate thing that I was like, oh, they're back. I didn't even know they loved it so much, but they have signed up for every single class. Okay. I guess something's working for those people.
So then we had to learn how to grow it kind of from that initial base, how to get other people.
The place the bottle shop I work at, that's huge. We were able to do classes there at the beginning. That's how we started it's a space we used. And then that's how we built it from the beginning. The client base is through my work. So people would come in and I would be like, I have a class coming up. So if it wasn't for that, it would have been much, much, much harder. That was, really good. But beyond that,
it was just, I don't know, we Instagram,
word of mouth,
got a mailing list together, sending people out information, and a lot of it was word of mouth at the beginning, wasn't it? And then, that's kind of how it sort of gradually grew. And then we're just looking to kind of grow it more and more, especially with Zoom classes now. Obviously, they don't need to be in Portland.
Yeah.
So you mentioned one of the challenges. Tell me about the other challenges of getting something like this going and of sustaining growth.
Well, I was just going to say that's another, it's been growing, and it's growing slowly, like in a normal speed, but that has been a huge challenge, is wanting it to grow much quicker, and knowing that what we're doing is something that, that people love and want, but not knowing how to find those people or have them find us is really frustrating. So I feel like the biggest challenge or kind of mental strain and energy strain is like, okay, well, how do we find, who can we partner with? How could we collaborate with other people to kind of like throw the word, spread the word into their networks? And it's just, how do we reach Instagram? Is the worst, because it has been huge for us, and there's so much potential in Instagram because it is everywhere. But man, the same, like, a couple hundred people who are my friends and like own wine shops around town are the only people who see my posts, and I'm like, these are not the people. And they're like, I love your stuff, it's great. And I'm like, that's great, you love it, but it's, but I want the other people to see it who are like going to be our customers, not just like my neighbors and my friends and my mom. That's been a huge challenge, is trying to reach people.
I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Really, because everything else is just kind of ticks over. It just kind of works. Doing the classes and that kind of thing, and when there was a real life, when you could see people, that was going pretty well. They were doing different places around town, so we were always kind of like a pop up, rather than just having just one home.
I mean, one challenge with when we were doing it in person is the class size is so limited, and because we're pouring the wine, and because of the way we structure the class, like literally physically, where we use a chalkboard or an old school overhead projector.
Old school.
It's great. It's amazing how many people have those just sitting around in their attics. Or teachers. But so everyone kind of has to have, 5 or 6 glasses in front of them and be facing something that they can see. And so it really limits what we do. And people are like, well, just don't use one of those things, or just, everyone always has ideas of how we can do it differently, but that's not who we are. Like, that's part of our whole thing is that centerpiece. And so, and so that was a challenge with in-person classes. Switching over to Zoom now, that challenge has been taken away, which is kind of cool, which is why now it's even more frustrating that we can't get the word out there, that I feel like we're fighting like the man, like the Instagram algorithm and like email servers, basically. I mean, how many times people come to me at my customers at my work who are also part of Sunday School's network, and they're like, well, when's the next class you're doing? I want to come. And I'm like, I've sent out an email every week, and I don't say it to them like that, but damn you. No. And they're like, I'm like, well, are you on our mailing list? They're like, yeah, I think so. And so then we sit there and they go search, and they're like, oh yeah, I just found them all in my spam folder or whatever. And I'm like, go in there and say that and still it just goes, it's so frustrating when people want the information, but you can't get it to them because all of these systems have been set up to prevent people like Old Navy from getting spamming you. And I'm like, but I'm just like, we're just little old Sunday school. Drives me nuts. I've spent way too much time, like weeks of my life, just trying to figure out how to. Oh man, I could talk about that for hours.
We could do that in another interview.
A separate marketing interview.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. You mentioned earlier being kind of surprised by the polls you do before class, the people interested in history. What else has surprised you about customers, either what they want or what they do or don't know coming in? What have been the biggest surprises from your customers?
One thing we found since we've done the Zoom classes is people want to have the wines that we're talking about. So we can give them other recommendations or tell them stuff to go and get, but they more often than not they say no. We want the wines that that you're using in the class. That's something that people are really.
It's like they don't want to think about it. They just want us to give it to them because they trust us. And I was surprised. I didn't think that people would buy full bottles for the class. So I started with, okay, here's 2 wines, and then here's 3 options, but you can buy 1 or 3 or 2. Here's 5 options, and every time I add more, people buy them all. And I think, and they might not even open them all during the class, but I think that having the education and then having wines that we paired with that education, even if they are just referencing those wines later, I think people are like so 100% for. I mean, and we've tried doing a wine club where it's not paired with education. We're like, here's wines that we love at the moment. People are like, that's cool. And some people are into it, but it's the education paired with the wines that people are willing to like spend money on, which has been, very surprising, I think.
What are the most common questions you're getting? What are the most common things people want to know from you that they want to, is it stories, is it facts, is it history, is it regions? Practical things.
They want to know what to pair, exactly what to pair. If we say pork, they're like, no, like what dish?
Why they get headaches.
They want to know what glasses to use. What temperature? I'm always surprised by that one. People want to know what temperature to drink their wine at. I'm like, I don't know. Whatever feels great. Feels good. Like, get a meat thermometer, and he always does that one because I get it because I'm like annoyed by that. I'm not,
I have the numbers.
It's the numbers. It's like too much detail for me.
But yeah, practical things, and I guess that's when we open up the questions to general things. It's like that's always the stuff that comes out, and that's
how to store their wine. People yesterday were asking, if I open a bottle of sparkling wine and I have it on the table like during the class, should I put it in the fridge? Should I put a cap, a cork in it, or a champagne cap thing on it? Like, yeah, it's all that.
But yesterday also, I mean, that's generally what comes up is those things. But yesterday, it started to nerd out on corks.
Oh yeah.
And people were really interested in that. Like, champagne corks and how they go in and how they stay in and what they're like when they came out. And we had a winemaker with us who was explaining things as well, which people liked. So yeah, there's kind of the general questions, and then some people really like
and details. Like I remember one time when we were talking about champagne and how they store years, decades worth of the wine to blend every year, and we were explaining that, and someone was like, "Where do they keep them all? Like, what does it look like?" People want to know like very specific things.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
So it's interesting. What that tells me, those questions tell me, is that the people aren't comfortable asking those questions elsewhere, and they bring them to you. So why? I guess A, why are you safe to ask, and B, why are people not able to ask others, tasting rooms or other places for those kind of information?
I guess one of the things we've always tried to do is just, like I said earlier, is just make it comfortable for people to ask any questions they want to ask, and to feel like they're a part of what's going on, and it's not just us lecturing them. It's like we're here all together kind of learning. And
yeah, and maybe that too, I think maybe that's an aspect of it, is that we don't know everything, and especially we're trying to be experts on wine in every subject, in every region, in every and so obviously oftentimes I don't know almost anything about Australian wine, for example, so I'm not going to do an Australian class soon. But like, my point is us being honest about the things that we don't know, and learning those things together with people, I think also, makes people feel comfortable that we're not pretending that we just like know everything.
The way we do it was just kind of like this, just like human people, as opposed to, I think a lot of tasting rooms, particularly in Oregon, are very friendly and that's fine. But when you come up against, if you like, official wine in restaurants and some kinds of bottle shops and some tasting rooms, it feels intimidating to people because of the way it's partly because of the way it's presented to them, maybe, or the way it's talked about, or possibly just because they go in with those assumptions, because it does seem like it's an intimidating thing. And it's one of the things that we don't like about the wine world, and it's changing. Fortunately, I think it is changing a lot. That there's a shift towards a more sort of casual, people can do it on their own terms rather than somebody else's terms that they're dictating down, kind of top down. I think there's more of a bottom up thing with wine now, hopefully.
So in addition to your classes, you've also have events. Tell me about some of the events you've done. I know Alt Wine Fest is a big one, but how things like that have come about and sort of pulling those off.
We've done dinners before. We've done happy hours with winemakers. We've done tastings with winemakers. We've done kind of like what we call an after hours, which is when we take over Mallory's bar for late night stuff and bring in kind of the wines that we want to pour for people. Apart from the festival, what else have we done?
I think that's it.
That kind of thing.
And
then the festival did last year. We should have been doing it in a couple of weeks, but it's obviously not going to happen this year. That came about just
because Erica at the old schoolhouse reached out to me through Instagram and wanted us to go out there and do a class, and we were like, well, we're probably, that'd be great, but we're not going to get a bunch of people from Portland to drive out to Newburgh just to do a class that they could very easily do somewhere in town that we do all the time. And so we were like, well, it needs to be, and then it kind of just grew from there. we're like, well, then we should have some winemakers. So then it's like more of a thing. And then we're like, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well just make it a thing. So maybe let's have 30. And so it just, yeah.
So,
And then, and we'd never done, I mean, obviously we'd never done that before. And so I don't think we knew what we were getting ourselves into.
we had 2 months to do it.
And we had 2 months to do it. But I think that it was good we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, because we didn't realize, like, we didn't have the perception, like, people were like, oh my gosh, you're throwing this whole thing together in 2 months. And that was after we were pretty much done putting it together. And I was like, I didn't realize, like, if I would have had that fear beforehand, that would have stopped me. But you know, when you, like, it's kind of this ignorance or naive, like, jumping into something, and then you do it because you're like, I don't know, I'll just do it.
How hard could it be?
Yeah, that's kind of what we did, and we just did it.
Yeah.
And luckily, we had a lot of help from people. So, and people who had done events that were like, here, use this to organize your volunteers. And so we had a lot of help in those areas.
And the winemakers were so into it. Finding the winemakers was really easy. So they just wanted to do it. We had to turn them away because there was too many.
And I was so surprised at how. That's another thing I was surprised by, people's responses. They were so into that. The winemakers and the people, the guests, whatever. Everyone was. I mean, we sold out like a week before, and people were calling and trying to, like, you know, convince us to buy them extra tickets and showing up at the door. And we were like, yeah. I was really surprised at how people were really into alt wine. And that's the other thing that I was surprised about, like, people, what was I gonna say? Like all the other events that we've done, people, and I think why maybe the wine club will work at some point when we have more people that are interested. But I think that's why the wine club doesn't really work, and all of those events that we've done, like tastings and happy hours and the after hours where we curate our own glass pour list based around, like, a region or something like that, have worked, because people want to experiment and they want to taste things, and they don't necessarily want to commit, but they want to, like, they want to explore, you know. And so it's very exciting for people to, like, try what are these weird 5 wines from Savoie that I've never heard of before, and I don't have to buy a whole bottle, but I can come and I can in this space that feels welcoming for that exploration, where I don't have to know anything. I can learn something and see if this is something that I want to, you know.
And that was the thing about the Alt Wine Fest, is that a lot of people were just blown away by the number of different wines, Oregon wines. The only rule was everything but Pinot. Just because, you know, Pinot was, I don't know what it is, 57% of production, and so we just wanted to give a shout out to everything else, really. And
he had a shirt that said Pinot Police, and he was making sure it wasn't sneakily blended into anything.
Yeah, people are like, I've got a Pinot blend, is that okay? Like, no.
Well, it's a rosé made from Pinot. We're like, no.
But yeah, some of the winemakers were like, I sold out of everything I bought. People just couldn't get enough of it. So that was good. That was nice to see that you know, people wanted those things. They wanted to find out.
Curious.
Yeah.
Curious.
Do you have any idea how many different kinds of wines you had there, or how many different kinds of varietals there were at Alt Fest?
Gosh, I did count at one point.
We did, didn't we? There was over 100 wines, but in terms of
maybe like 40 to somewhere around there.
yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
It's incredible. So tell me about, you mentioned kind of the naivete of jumping into an event like that without really knowing. So tell me about pulling it together and about tracking winemakers down and space down and all of that and pulling it off. What went into it? What was, in that event and other events, what goes into that to make them successful?
I'll tell you what, tracking winemakers is like herding sheep.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
All they had to do was like sign a form and send us a check or something. We did everything for them. We did all the paperwork for them. They just had to, like, pretty much sign a form, give us a couple of names, and it was just like, it was like the last day we had to turn something in. We drove down to wine country and get a piece of paper off somebody. I won't say who it was, but
we need to commiserate about this off camera sometime, because this is sounding very familiar.
It was crazy. The rest of it, actually, I mean, this is probably why am an entrepreneur at heart is because I love doing stuff like figuring out things. So like I wouldn't want to do it for all the time, but I love that, like, all right, so how do I figure out, how are we gonna, I don't even know, like, what do we need from the OLCC and how do I figure that out? And then like, what do we need? What was even part of it? It was so long
There
ago.
was some paperwork, there was accounting
No,
paperwork.
I mean, not the LCC stuff, but like what else even went into it? How are we going to decorate? Like, how are we going to organize the volunteers? So how are we going to, what about food? How are we going to figure that out? And what did they get and what do we
Parking.
get? Oh, parking. How do we figure out parking and how do I
Yeah.
find? And so it's almost like a big puzzle that you have to put together, and you have to figure out all the little pieces of it, and then it starts to kind of come together, and it's really fun. I loved doing it, actually. Yeah, I don't know. What else?
Well, you mentioned already, obviously, where you've had to shift. You've shifted to online only, Zoom. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic here. So, tell me about what that's done to kind of your business. What you see for the future for yourselves, and for the near and long term future, and what you're kind of hoping for as things get back to normal at some point.
Well, as I said, we had to obviously cancel the festival and then all the in-person classes, so we do everything on Zoom, and that works well. It's probably, I was going to say it works better than we thought, but maybe I didn't know how it was going.
Yeah, it's not like we had planned,
we were just like, let's do it.
anticipated anything in particular.
But that does work well. We get to draw other people in. Which we'd like to do more of. So we get some people from the East Coast. We had some people from different countries come. So that's fun being able to do that, and it works well. We still have the blackboard. We still use that. I don't know what else.
Should we talk about what we're planning on doing? Or is that a secret?
And then, the other thing that we want to do is have online classes.
Like pre-recorded
yeah,
course.
That people can watch online and give them materials and things with that, so they can do it without us. Or maybe they can check in with us or something. Anyway, that's something that we're in the process of doing, figuring out. Started writing those classes as well. So that's something for the future.
Interesting.
And then I anticipate, I don't know if we talked about this, we might have, doing once, in-person classes start back up at some point. I still feel like Zoom is a thing, and so I'm hoping that Zoom will still be our default, and that we can, in this time, build the community beyond Portland, so that we have, so that that makes sense. And then in-person classes we'll still do, but that those will be more one-offs.
Yeah.
And hopefully then we can travel around and do them other places.
Doesn't that sound amazing?
Yeah.
What about things like alt wine? Is that something that you're anticipating, hoping to be able to bring back?
Definitely.
We were trying to figure out how to do it this year, and it was just too difficult.
Yeah.
It was
Plexiglass, like the
spacing
number of
people.
people that we'd have to hire just for that,
Yeah.
for social distance purposes. It was like,
it's too crazy. So yeah.
But yeah,
definitely.
for sure.
I know something that you guys have been interested in, at least via your Instagram lately, has been sort of diversifying Oregon wine and working on that. Tell me about what your impressions of Oregon wine have been in the time you've been around it, and sort of what you see as the next step in need in terms of taking it forward, inclusivity and diversity-wise.
Well, in terms of diversity, there isn't really any in Oregon wine.
Well, in Oregon and Portland in general, it's very
Portland.
white, so makes sense.
There's a handful of winemakers, and there's even probably less people involved in other aspects of it, other aspects of the wine industry apart from winemakers. So that's obviously something that needs to change. And I think, just judging by the kind of feedback and the people we've been talking to in the industry, it's like there is a big groundswell in the industry that they want that to happen. That people want to change things. try and make that happen. So that's good. That
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know, because it's kind of like you know, we're doing indefinitely free classes for BIPOC. But like that, you know, it's like if the industry is already industry is so white, and so it's like, what person of color is like, oh, this seems like fun to be a part of, like it kind of is like the chicken and the egg, you know. So I feel like in the same way that well, not in the same way, it's very different, but the wine world is, the traditional wine world is has this kind of, can have this like snobbiness and pretentiousness, right? And if it's if people like feel ostracized from it just for not knowing anything, like how would a person of color feel when it's also all white people, and there's that like pretentious, snobby, traditional, whatever attitude, to be frank. But yeah, so I don't know what the answer is. All I know is the tiny little things that we can do, you know, which is be vocal and provide the accessibility that we're able to provide, and have the conversations with other. And I think also, I mean, this is something that I believe in, and that is that I keep saying is that we're not islands, and so it's like each individual person or business is like, you know, can do their individual thing, but how much more effective can we be if we all kind of know what everyone's doing and are able to kind of support each other? And yeah, I don't know, like for example, we can provide education, but then what if a person of color wants to get a job at a wine bar? Like, how do I know where? I don't want to send them to somewhere where then now they're just going to go work at this place where they're just going to feel like shit all the time because because the people there are not welcoming to people of color, you know. And so I think that's an important aspect of it, is the individuals and businesses keeping each other accountable and knowing who are those people that are safe places, that are working and learning and trying to provide as best as we can a place that is different from what it used to be. It's a place that is welcoming to the BIPOC community. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't have all the answers.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, of course you don't, and I'm curious. I was curious what role you wanted to play, and it's a good start. Do you have other kind of future thoughts on roles you can play personally, or that you can help play to help those efforts? So do you have thoughts on the horizon, kind of thing?
I don't know. I think it's I don't know what you're going to say. Let's see what you're going to say.
No, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know, it's a bit early to tell at the moment, just because of, you know, we're kind of talking to other people in the industry, and there's been a lot of reaction to it and stuff. But how we're going to build from that, I'm not quite sure.
And what our place is too.
Yeah, it's there's going to be people better than us to lead this, and you know, there's people from, you know, the BIPOC community and stuff or whatever should be in a leadership role, really, but not us doing it. And so
yeah, so right now we're in the conversation stage, and just kind of like I have ideas and we have ideas, and we're sharing those ideas with other people so that they're not just sitting in our heads, and then ultimately taking whatever role we feel like we need to take, instead of just like deciding to be white saviors about everything. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, what do you see as you look ahead for the Oregon wine industry in general? Obviously, kind of tumultuous times at the moment. Near term, long term future. What is Oregon wine going to look like in 5-10 years?
Assuming we don't have a pandemic for the rest of the decade. I mean, I think it's exciting time for Oregon wine, because there's a lot of winemakers who are taking risks and willing to try things, and realizing that there's more than just Pinot that can be done here. And yeah, I talk to winemakers all the time, and like even some people you wouldn't expect they're like, yeah, I want to make a Gamay this year or something, or there's people who are like, yeah, trying to get my hands on some Trousseau or something, and I think all of that is great, and people are planting different stuff, and there's I think people are finding different bits of the valley that are working because it's so big, and then there's what's going on in the Columbia Gorge is interesting. Obviously Southern Oregon tends to get overlooked sometimes because of the sort of the glamour of the Willamette Valley, but there's interesting things going on there. So I think it's a great region, and I was talking to a French winemaker last week who's here and makes wine here, and he just thinks it's amazing. He's like, he's from Burgundy, and he's like, yeah, Burgundy's great, but it's kind of boring because this is what we just have to do, and it's just, we got a row of hills and they all face the same way. But here there's just stuff everywhere. It's like he was talking about how he found some like vineyard that was sort of off the beaten track that people didn't really know about, and he was like, this is amazing, and that kind of thing. So, and that's the other thing, is there's a lot of sort of passion here, people trying things, and it's always just great talking to winemakers and other people here about it. It just seems to have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Every French winemaker we talk to who made wine in Burgundy and is here now, they feel like they've been like unshackled. Like they're like, oh, freedom.
Yeah.
I can choose my date. I can choose my varietal. I can choose my.
Yeah.
This is amazing. It's like a
basically do what I want.
kidney candy store. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Mallory, I'm sorry the sun chased you around the table
It's
there. We're
okay.
almost done here,
It's
so
okay.
I will. I'm sorry.
okay.
Okay. What would if someone were to ask you for your words of wisdom on joining the wine industry in some capacity, what would you tell them? What would your words of wisdom be?
Oh man.
Do you mean like as a job, or just to?
It's a job, and yeah, trying to make money in the Oregon wine industry, I suppose, in some way.
That was a question I wasn't expecting, I guess.
So,
Do you have a tricky one at the
tricky
end?
one at the end. Sorry, yeah.
Classic journalist. I mean, one thing about the industry here that it is that the people in the industry are generally good people. They're friendly people, and they're very happy to share their knowledge and to help people out, which I think is good. In the main, there might be some exceptions, and so I think that's good. Is just to try and just talk to people. There's obviously educational routes you can take. There's there's classes like WSET and things that you can do if you want to get those qualifications. There's obviously Linfield.
I think building connections is probably the first thing and the most important thing, and that's what's going to get you places, because you can come in with some qualification and you're not really going to go anywhere. And I guess I would say even that, like you said, there are, most people are very friendly and willing to share their knowledge and support. And then there, might be some people who aren't, and so I would almost say, like, if you come across the one who's not that way, like, just move on. Like, I don't.
Yeah, you've just
my
been
fear
unlucky.
my fear is that someone would come across that and feel that barrier, and that would discourage the entire process. And so I would just say, don't even give that the time of day. Move on to someone else and find that person who is going to support you, and then hold on to that and let that person and those people help you build those connections, and then invest in or figure out a way to get the degrees or the whatever, the knowledge or whatever it is that you need. I think people, especially in Oregon, like we were talking about earlier, it's such a beautiful community and everyone, that I feel like that's really valuable here.
All right, last question for you. This is the one I'll warn you about because it's a little philosophical. What is wine's role in society?
Well, my answer was kind of cliched, so I didn't want to say it.
Oh, say your cliche
It's
answer.
The cliche answer is like to bring people together, but it kind of is that. It kind of is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an alcoholic drink. But So it's something to be enjoyed, but I think it does play a role in bringing people together. There's nothing like sharing a bottle of wine with people. You know, that's always something we enjoy doing. Is you know, having a bottle of wine and sometimes talking about it, sometimes not. Doesn't matter. But as I said earlier, I mean, just from a historical perspective, that wine can intersect with anything, any kind of like, any type of history you want to do, wine turns up there. And it plays a deeper role than perhaps than people realise in many ways.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And yeah,
It's a good answer. So, Raz, all the questions I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Is there anything we didn't cover today that we should have covered?
The thing we didn't mention actually is because we didn't do Alt Wine Festival, but we did do kind of an Alt Wine Summit on Zoom, where we got together some winemakers and a couple of Californian winemakers as well.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
And then had some wine packs for people to have, and to yeah, that was good. So we had a lot of people turn up for that Zoom one, and the winemakers talking. We were just going through some questions about alt wine and what it is, why the future, and that
Which
kind of
makes me think, actually, another thing that I didn't mention before that is interesting about what people want and the type of like response we get to what we're doing, and the industry response, not from like makers necessarily, but from people who are working in bars and restaurants with wine in some capacity. I was really surprised at how much, which is actually interesting to see how even people who are working in the industry are intimidated about wine and to ask those questions and don't have the answers to those questions. And so I was really surprised at how much, I mean, people are coming all the time, are asking us to do classes for industry in particular, so that people who are serving wine feel confident telling their customers that this is what this is. And yeah, and that just made me think of it, because the Alt Wine Summit and Alt Wine Fest, I think, was a lot of like industry people who still feel that kind of don't feel that confidence or that welcoming in the world that they're already in, which is really interesting and kind of sad. So yeah, that's something that's an idea that I don't know if how, to what capacity we'll get to it, but to kind of have a branch of Sunday school that's aimed at industry, I would love to do that. We have lots on our list, but someone said that we should call it Sunday School Pro, which I think is pretty cute.
Sunday School Plus.
Yeah,
exactly.
that,
Or just Sunday College, Sunday University, Sunday graduate degree. Yeah,
totally.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much for having us here today, for sharing your stories and your thoughts with us, and very exciting for us to hear about Sunday School, because it's like it corresponds so much with what we're doing with Linfield and what we want to do as an archive. So, thank you so much for doing that and for sharing it with us today. And we will let you off the hook so we can get Mallory out of the sun.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.